Hey guys, it's Haniya and this is my plant channel. If you're new here, I tend to really love starting seeds and showing how I do it, but from time to time I get questions about how I start seeds and what I use to start seeds, so I figured I'd make a couple of informational videos, this being the second one in a series about seed starting. I use a number of different tools and or things to help me start my seeds, but I'm always open to new suggestions, so if you don't see anything mentioned in this video, please feel free to leave a comment below and tell me like, hey, why didn't you mention this? Or like, oh, I love to use this tool when I use my seeds, because I always want to get better. Before we get started, I just wanted to say really quickly that this is not about soil, light, heat, moisture, any of those things that you also need to have seeds to germinate. I am purely making this about like the physical things that you contain seeds in and the stuff that you may put on top of seeds or use to move seeds around, but not the actual medium in which seeds grow or the seeds themselves. And the reason for that is because if you've started any number of seeds in your life, you might already know that not all seeds are the same, and there are a lot of differences between the different types of species and even families of plants that I can't possibly say what works in every scenario in one video or ever, because that's just not how plants work. So what I am doing is just giving a rundown of all the tools that I have on hand that I typically go to the grocery store for or order online on a regular basis, because these are things that I use over and over again and find that they are super helpful when I'm working and or like experimenting with seeds. So there you have it. Now we can get started. The first thing I really want to talk about are containers, and I really love this. I think they're mostly on Amazon. They're called Mix C. I have a link to them in my description if you wanted to try them out. I think most people use them, honestly, because they're always sold out on Amazon. It is essentially just plastic, 3 plastic pieces that you put together. You put your soil in there, you can put your water in the bottom or just put in moist soil as it is, but excess water will drain to the bottom. The one qualm I have about these is that the lid tends to be very movable, and if you're trying to just lift this up and put it on a shelf, sometimes the thing falls off if you're not careful. It's not latched on, there is no like safety mechanism to keep it together. So you just have to be extra careful when you're moving these around. And especially if you live in a place like I do and shelf space is limited and you like to cram things all together, it's likely that you might eventually knock one of these off and you'll be really sad because all your seeds will go flying out and probably get bent stems, and you're just an unhappy camper. So there you go, Mix C starting trays. And then the second thing I wanted to talk about is compostable clear cups, and these I think are made of like a bioplastic, and they will eventually, or they will compost faster than other types of plastic, so they're a little bit more environmentally friendly. And I will say that too, I try to reuse all plastics whenever possible because I am aware of how much plastic is in the environment. So that's just your PSA for today, kids. Recycle. I like these cups a lot because you can poke holes in them, you can do a number of things. Sometimes if they're anthurium seeds, I might just put a ton of vermiculite in there and then put a cover on top so that the moisture stays inside, and then put it under a light. They're very versatile. The only thing is just that you don't have a ton of space on the inside to plant seeds like you do with a normal tray. But for specialty seeds, they can be very handy, especially if you only have a couple of them and just need to put them on some moist vermiculite or something like that. These are awesome. And finally, I love condiment cups and their little lids. And I use these in my ficus starting, which I also did a recent video on that too. I just put a bunch of rocks in here and then put the ficus seeds on top after they're soaked, and then seal it up, because ficus seedlings are super tiny at first and they need a lot of moisture and light to grow, and you can kind of just leave them sealed until they're big enough to repot. I also start begonia seedlings in here too. They're also super tiny. Those seeds are super tiny. If you're just trying to get a bunch of seedlings and they, can grow together in a clump, these are perfect. And especially if you have tiny seeds that you're trying to monitor really easily, these are also perfect. So since I mentioned recycling, I wanted to move to the next set of items that I like to use with seeds, and that is sterilization tools. So I typically use, these are alcohol wipes, and they're 75% alcohol. I also really love to use hydrogen peroxide, and I don't have like a brand of choice, they're just what I have on hand. But sterilization is super important, especially when you're working with seeds that are prone to rot. Diascorea comes to mind, that you want to make sure the soil is sterilized, but also your container. So if I'm talking about the mixed seed trays, I might douse them in a hydrogen peroxide solution, let them soak for a little bit, and that should hopefully kill any bacteria or other, crap that's in here. I also use hydrogen peroxide to sterilize my tools, which I'll get to in a second, or alcohol wipes, obviously. But I do like to use hydrogen peroxide as a last-ditch effort to get rid of mold on seeds or seedlings. I know a lot of people have mentioned that cinnamon can be useful. I've never had any success with it personally, so use cinnamon at your own risk. But hydrogen peroxide has worked wonders. I also sometimes just pour it on top of seeds directly that have not germinated yet, and I find that that's super helpful for getting the seeds to come out of their shell. So that's kind of exciting. It's always useful to have sterilization products on hand, just in case you just use some of your tools, or you randomly grab a pair of scissors that you want to cut open a seed bag with, and you're just trying to minimize any sort of contamination that might go from plant bed to plant bed, or from any other place in your home that you're using your tools for and then starting seeds with. So that is my take on sterilization. You can also use soap and water for the most part, but I like to be extra sure with alcohol wipes and with hydrogen peroxide, and sometimes I will do soap and water even on top of those, just to make sure it is sterile as far as I can get it, because as you know, plastic you can't boil because it'll tend to melt. Crazy, right? So since I just talked about sterilization, I want to get into the tools that I sterilize. This first thing is a widger that is made of stainless steel, and I can just rub it with a alcohol wipe simply every time I use it, especially if you're wanting to get really tiny seeds out of a really porous mixture and you're afraid you're going to kill all of them. This is a really helpful tool, and they make bigger ones that I got with my mixed seed trays, which look like this. It's almost like having like lobster arms or something. These are not super useful for me. I really don't plant seedlings that are this huge. And if I do, I tend to put them in 4-inch pots instead of the tinier mixed seed trays. I guess I could have shown what 4-inch pots are, but everyone knows what 4-inch pots are, right? And that really is a call about how big the seed is. If the seed's like a nickel to quarter size, I'm not gonna put it in a mixed seed tray because it will totally explode out of the pocket. Back to sterilization. So I just use a regular alcohol wipe and I clean all my tools with it. Usually I do that. This is a dribbler, by the way. I just showed a widger. This is a dribbler. You can get really nice ones, or you can get cheap plastic ones that come with your mixed seed trays. They'll do the job, but I rarely have to make holes this big, and a lot of the seeds that I tend to plant, you just surface sow, so I don't use it all that much. But they are super useful for getting your seeds in place and or marking the correct depth. There is like a little ruler on the side of this dribbler that says, oh, okay, this is half an inch. So if you do know you have to put it at a certain depth, then that can be useful. I prefer the stainless steel one, obviously, because it feels more precise and I can clean it easier and not have to worry about the plastic as much. I'd also recommend getting some seed labels and a pencil. I forget to mark my seeds all the time, and I get kind of upset with myself that I forgot to mark them. So I would give you a word of caution that it's always nice to know how long it took something to come up. And if you don't have that information, then it sucks, because next time you can't plan correctly if you are trying to plan your seeds for something. Next, I just have a really simple nail file that I use, and you can just get them at the drugstore in the health and beauty section. Honestly, nail files are really great for scarifying seeds that need to be chipped up a little bit. Essentially, you're like the bird or the animal that's eating the seed and nicking away at its shell, and that helps the water get in But because the seeds that you get typically aren't like digested by a bird, you need to nail file it away a little bit before you can plant it. And then I tend to use a fresh nail file every time if I have it on hand. They're probably not that easy to sterilize because it's just like grit sandpaper, but maybe you can. I also use a paint marker that helps me write on the side of plastic bags or other materials that a pencil or pen wouldn't work on. And I think that paint markers are really great because they're fun to use and because it's like usually a fun color that helps you remember, like, oh yeah, blue means those are my Camphoria seeds or my Tylocodon seeds, and my kitten's going crazy right next to me. So I'm hoping she doesn't knock anything over. Last but not least, I like to keep on hand napkins, paper towels, and a baggie, and that is just because, you know, as a last resort, a lot of times I will just put seeds in the paper towel and start them using the paper towel method. And you can also use toilet paper or a napkin on hand if you have one. And I tend to reuse baggies too, another plastic thing that I reuse all the time. And the reason I keep it on hand is just because sometimes seeds are stubborn, and some of the seed varieties that you have may not even germinate on dirt or on vermiculite or any other medium that you may have. A paper towel and baggie is useful because you can always use the last couple of your seeds, put them in here, and hope that they germinate. And maybe you'll at least get some germination, especially if they're more difficult seeds to germinate. Very last but not least, spray bottle. And I only bring this up because I sometimes even forget to use it myself, and I think it's a really awesome tool if you are working with really tiny seeds. I tend to forget to moisten my soil sometimes before I put the seeds on top, and then I'm like, oh crap. You can't use a watering can when you plant really tiny seeds because they tend to get lodged deep into the soil and they won't germinate because they don't have light. So a spray bottle helps just put a light layer of water on the top and also keeps those seeds moist, but also isn't going to move them too much because the water pressure isn't too high. And this is great for seeds like begonias or even Drosera, where you're just trying to make sure that the medium is still moist, but you don't want to drown them, and you're not trying to like soak it like you would for maybe a bigger seedling that can withstand a lot of water. The last thing I'll mention is that sometimes I just keep a plastic storage container on hand, and either I can leave some standing water in for plants that need standing water, like ant plants or Drosera, where they like to be in like a bog type environment, or yeah, just basically putting all my crap in as I'm moving around my apartment and starting seeds in different places, or moving my seed starting kits to different places to work out. Thanks for watching, guys. If you stuck with me to this point, I know it's a lot of information, and I was trying to really think on my feet about why I do certain things. Let me know in the comments if I didn't explain anything fully, and or if you have different methods that are more efficient than what I'm doing. I'm happy to learn. I would love to hear from you. And also feel free to bug me if you're curious about where I bought any of these supplies, or if you don't know where to buy them. A lot of them can be bought on Amazon or Etsy, or at your local drugstore. I don't really spend a lot of time thinking too hard about where I buy my seed starting things, but again, if it seems difficult to find, let me know. Awesome. Well, I'm hoping to upload my next video in a couple of days, and we will get back on track with some seed starting. Thanks, guys.